All right, so we are working with for data representation. The very first thing that we want to do for today's activity is find your total. Regardless of what you're talking about, there's always going to be a total. Now, sometimes if they're giving you percents, they're going to tell you how many people were surveyed. Or sometimes you're going to have to find how many people total were surveyed. So we want to find your total. Okay. The next thing that you want to do is label. You want to label your charts or your graphs. Figure out what they're talking about. Label each, especially when you're dealing with dot plots. Okay, you want to label numbers. This includes the numbers. This includes titles, right? Or the subject. Whatever it is that you're talking about. Then finally, oh no, not finally. This is just number 3. Create fractions. Now, I know that some of you don't like fractions, but fractions are actually pretty easy. All you're telling me is the part and the whole. So I'm going to write part and whole. This is a very setup. Not always will it be part to whole. Sometimes it might be part to part. But for the most part, when we're dealing with percents and when we're dealing with data information or representations, it's going to be part to whole. So we're going to create your fractions. And I want you to circle that word and. If needed. So on some occasions, you will find a number. Like suppose I have 20 students out of 60 that were surveyed. Right. Can you tell me what the percent is? Well, okay. What we're going to do is that means I have to go from percent, right, from the total over to the side number 100. Well, I don't know what this number is. I don't know how many 60s fit in 100, but I can certainly simplify this number. So I'm going to simplify 20 out of 60 and divide it by, let's divide it by 5. So 60, actually no, I'm going to divide it by 20. Let's divide it by 20. So by 20 is actually 3, and 20 divided by 20 is 1. So now I have 1/3 times what number would give me a percent out of 100. What is the closest way that I can get from 3 to 100? Well, I know that if I multiply it times 0.3, 33.3 times 3, that's going to give me 99.9, right? So then whatever I do to the top number, I do to the bottom, and vice versa. So then 1 times 33.3 would be 33.3%. Okay? So sometimes it's easier to break it down than to build it back up. All right. So that's one example. Number 4, create your proportions. And I'm not going to give you an example of that because we just did it up on top. Right? We simplified, and then we created our second proportion next to it. But while we're doing this activity, once you've listed those things out and you've identified the things that they're asking you, and you've tried to find whatever, like breaking down the information, or broken down the information to create your fractions, to list things you notice. For example, which are the same? What are things that are the same? So maybe we're talking about ice cream, and you'll find that it is 25% of the favorite of the group that was surveyed, and vanilla was another 25%. So you can say vanilla and chocolate are the same. I want you to look at for the ones that are different, right? Which really different, which ones are really different, right? Let's say it's 3% of pistachio and 30% that Rocky Road. Okay, well that's a really big change. And then finally, which ones are halves and which ones are doubles. So let's say half. If you have something that's 60% and another thing that is 30 half, right? Or if you have something that's doubled, let's say you have something that's 20% and another item that is 40%. That's a double, or 2 times, or twice. Those are things that you want to take notice of, okay? Because sometimes questions come out of there. For today's assignment, be looking, it is a gallery walk. I want you to work in pairs, okay? We have enough students to work in pairs. Walking to at least 3 stations. By the time you reach your 3rd station, you should be able to solve the problem, okay? But before you begin, what you're going to do is you're going to know. For some of them, it may mean looking at mean, mode, range. What's the other one? Median, right? I also find your total and then write your fractions. If you can write your fractions down, if you get to that, that's fine. Earlier in the class, I had one student who thought he was being funny, and instead of writing, when I said write what you see, what do you think he wrote? I see numbers. I see words. He thought he was being funny. Well, he's going to think it's funny when I call home and gets in trouble with his parents. So please don't be that student. I don't want to have to call. Are we good with this? So you want to follow these steps, because these steps are really what are going to help you break it down. I know that today with our warm-up, some people were a little lost and had no idea what to do if you hadn't seen. But it's definitely things that you can and will do. All right, let's get started.